This story began with a simple evening walk home, but turned into a real fight for justice. When a pregnant woman is pushed by a police officer for no reason, everything changes. This is not just about cruelty. It's about a system that doesn't see people, and about how one man, willing to fight to the end, changes the rules of the game. Are you ready to find out how this horrific event led to a major revolution? I was walking home from work. I had spent the last few hours on my feet, sorting through books at the library, and now, with a bag of groceries in my hands, I was just walking down my usual route. Trevor was waiting for me at home. We had planned to spend the evening together. He loved my seafood pasta, so I was going to make it while he rested after a busy day. I even smiled, imagining how happy he would be. I wasn't in a hurry, just walking, each step calm and measured. I held my belly with both hands because, being 8 months pregnant, it was a little harder to walk, but I was used to it. The baby was moving inside me, and it was wonderful to feel him reacting to everything going on around him. I was ready for the evening, a quiet night, and the long journey to motherhood. Just a few more steps, and I would be home with Trevor. But that all changed when I turned the corner. A police car stopped right next to the sidewalk. At first, I didn't pay any attention to it. I thought they were just passing by. But the car slowed down and stopped as if I had been caught doing something wrong. It wasn't just a police officer, it was Officer Daniels. He was well known in our neighborhood. When I saw him, I knew immediately that nothing good was going to happen. It never did. Stop. His voice was sharp, and I felt something inside me break. I was in his sights, even though I was just walking home with a bag of oranges in my hands. I turned my head sharply and stopped in my tracks. What happened? Why did he stop me? I hadn't broken any rules. I was just going home, like every day. You look suspicious, he said. His voice was harsh, even sinister. I tried to understand what he meant. I even tried to say a few words to him. I'm just going home, I said, trying to keep my voice calm, even though my heart was beating very fast. At that moment, I felt my legs start to tremble slightly. Don't lie to me. You're just standing there, loitering. It's suspicious, he said, coming closer. I didn't understand why he was reacting this way. What had I done wrong? It was just my usual walk. I wasn't going to prove anything to him. However, he started talking even more rudely, and his steps were getting closer. I just want to go home. I tried to remain calm and not give in to provocation. My stomach felt heavy, and I couldn't allow myself to raise my voice or provoke aggression. I just tried to keep walking. But he didn't stop. What's more, I saw him coming toward me, his hand reaching for his gun as if I were a real criminal. And I couldn't do anything. I was too vulnerable, pregnant, without any weapons or protection. Don't move, he said, and his hand moved even closer to the holster on his belt. And then, on every level, something inside me exploded. I couldn't just walk away. I had no right to stand there while he could do whatever he wanted. My hand automatically dropped to my stomach. I felt the baby inside me move too. I tried to calm myself, but I could feel his aggression, and it was getting harder and harder to stay calm. No, don't come closer, I tried to explain to him, even though I was completely paralyzed with fear. But instead of backing away, he took another step, and then he pushed me. It happened so fast that I didn't even have time to react. My stomach was in front, and I tried to protect it carefully with my hands. But I felt the ground start to move beneath my feet. That's when I fell. My hands hit the asphalt, and the bags of oranges scattered across the sidewalk. I was lying on the ground, clutching my stomach, breathing heavily, and the whole world seemed foggy. I couldn't move. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't tell if my baby was okay. My body was sore and sprawled out on the cold asphalt, and my eyes were filled with despair. People started to approach, but they didn't help. They just took out their phones. Are there people who just stand and watch when something bad happens? I froze, not knowing if my child was still safe. The sound of my footsteps as I fell drowned out all the street noise for a moment. I lay there, feeling pain in every cell of my body. At that moment, I didn't think about my own life. I only thought about my baby, wondering if he was okay. Quick, call an ambulance. I heard voices, but I couldn't answer. I just clenched my teeth and covered my stomach with my hands, praying that everything would be okay. Officer Daniels didn't even look back. He just turned around and got into his car as if nothing had happened. He didn't even glance at me, and I lay there on the ground, realizing that I had only just begun to fight. Because this incident was a catalyst for change for me, and I knew that everything that had happened would not go unpunished. When I came to, I was already being taken to the hospital. That's how your reality begins when you are subdued not only physically, but also psychologically. I was nervous. I could hardly breathe, but I was even more frightened by the thought of what had happened to the baby. Every jolt of the car was like a new blow. I felt like I was clinging to the last threads of control. So when the nurse said that the baby was fine, I almost couldn't believe my ears. Trevor was already there at the hospital, and all I could say when he burst into the room was, "You won't believe what happened." I saw despair in his eyes, and his face changed as if he had aged 10 years in an instant. He didn't ask how I was feeling. He asked who had done this. I felt his pain, but also the pain in my own soul, because I didn't know what else to say. We had no idea what to do next. I was taken from the street, and the doctors tried to calm us down, saying that the child might be in danger, but it was too early to say for sure. They asked questions, and I answered confusedly, trying to keep myself together. My mind kept returning to one thought. I was not alone in this world, and my child had to be safe. All these thoughts came flooding back when Trevor started calling friends and lawyers. He didn't wait for the system to deliver justice. He was ready to act. And at that moment, even through all the pain, I knew he wouldn't stop. He had a goal: to fix what had happened. But what really happened? What kind of madness was it when a police officer, inspired by his own power, decided he could hit a pregnant woman without any justification? I decided I wasn't going to stay silent anymore. I couldn't let this go unpunished. Trevor was stubborn. He promised me he wouldn't stay quiet. And, at that moment, I realized that I wasn't just fighting for myself, but for others too. If we stay silent, if we don't speak up, then the next time another woman finds herself in a similar situation, she'll be all alone. And those thoughts wouldn't leave me alone. A few hours after I arrived at the hospital, when my nerves began to calm down, I saw the news on Trevor's phone. The video of the incident was circulating online and had millions of views. I was shocked. At first, I didn't even understand why people were reacting this way. But then I realized we all had the same question. Why did this happen? How many more cases like this will it take for us, as a society, to feel and realize that violence is not normal? That police officers do not have the right to act like tyrants on our streets? Trevor didn't wait. He got a lawyer, but not just any lawyer. He turned to an old friend, Marcus, who was now a civil rights lawyer. And that was the right thing to do. We decided to take action, and to act quickly. "We will not be silent," Trevor said when I started to worry that we didn't have enough strength. He believed it, and that encouraged me. Yes, we were strong, even though every day was going to feel like a struggle. The next morning, when I woke up in the hospital and looked at Trevor sitting next to me, I knew we had to do everything we could to prevent this case from becoming another one of those incidents that were swept under the rug. We had to show that there is strength in each of us, even when it seems like the fight is lost before it even begins. Trevor went to a lawyer, and I just lay in bed and felt every movement of the baby in my belly. That was the moment I made my decision. I would stand up for myself, for my child, for all the women who had been victimized by the system. Marcus contacted the media, and within hours we had support not only from local activists, but also from well-known human rights organizations. Trevor wasn't just trying to protect me. He was raising the issue of all the other cases where Black women were targeted by the police, where their voices weren't heard and their pain went unanswered. Meanwhile, the video continued to gain traction, and it felt like the whole world could now see what had happened to me. I didn't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing. But one thing I knew for sure: I was no longer alone. Now there would be many of us, and we would fight. There was one important detail on this journey that I couldn't forget. Justice doesn't come on its own. It requires struggle, demanding steps, and a willingness to stand your ground, even when the world tries to leave you in the shadows. A day passed, and I was still in the hospital. Although my body had begun to recover from the blow, the pain inside did not subside. but I knew I had to get up and start acting. The calm I had tried to surround myself with over the past few days was no longer working. My strength was in fighting, and if not me, then who? When Trevor came back, I saw the determination on his face, which he didn't hide. There was a fire in his eyes that I had never seen before. He was ready for battle, and I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. We were no longer just two people who had been wronged by the system. We had become symbols of change. Marcus thinks we should go public. The video has already gotten millions of views, and this is our chance to change what's happening to people like us, Trevor said, pulling me out of my deep thoughts. I didn't say anything at first. My head was spinning with thoughts. What would happen next? How would this change us? But in the end, I realized that we couldn't just leave things to chance. If we do this, Trevor, I want us to speak not only for ourselves, but for all those who remain silent. About those who can no longer fight, who no longer have the strength to speak out. I stroked my belly, which was getting bigger every day, and felt the baby move inside. He was mine, and I was his protection, and that became my motivation. I had to be stronger, not just for myself, but for him. Trevor looked at me with surprise and pride. He knew how hard it was for me to pull myself together, but he also knew that I would never give up the fight if it was for the right reasons. The next day, when I was discharged from the hospital, we went to Marcus to discuss our strategy. Under his guidance, we began to prepare a public campaign that shook the entire country. Everything was ready: a press conference, social media posts, requests to human rights organizations. Marcus worked tirelessly, gathering testimony and seeking support from other victims of police brutality. The process was exhausting, nerve-wracking, and even painful, but I felt that despite my fear, I was beginning to feel like I was part of something bigger. We began to understand that this was not just our personal battle. It was a question of the system, a question of how we could change what happens to everyone who becomes a victim of police aggression. We received support from local community organizations, human rights activists, and even some politicians who saw this as a chance to change the situation. Meanwhile, new publications appeared in the media. The news spread across the country. The video of the incident, where Officer Daniel stops me on the sidewalk and pushes me to the ground, became a symbol. He, like many others, was confident that his impunity could not be questioned. But this time it was different. Over the next few days, various human rights organizations spoke out in the news, confirming that what happened to me was just the tip of the iceberg. There had been much more violence like this, and for years it had been silenced and hidden. Women, Black women, have been targeted by police aggression in cities across the country, and now these stories are starting to come to light. 2 days later, Trevor and I went to a press conference. I started to speak, and to be honest, I wasn't prepared for what I felt. My whole world was out of control, but I knew I had to be strong. Now it's not just about my pain. It's about justice for all of us. My name is Leah Davis, and I am pregnant. I was just a woman walking home from work, and that was enough for Officer Daniels to stop me, punch me, throw me to the ground, and I couldn't even defend myself. I looked into the camera and felt my heart racing. It was hard, but those words were mine. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was fighting for justice, for those who couldn't fight for themselves. We will not be silent anymore. We cannot allow ourselves to be disrespected again. I looked at Trevor. He was with me. And in that moment, I knew we weren't doing this just for ourselves. The video from the press conference went viral again. Millions of people watched it. Time was on our side. The whole country learned that violence cannot go unpunished and that the truth must not be hidden. The streets filled with people who came together to support us. We were not alone. And that was the most important thing. We began to understand that when people unite, they can change any system, even the strongest ones. Trevor looked at me, and I saw that together we had achieved something that could not have been achieved alone. We were together not only in the struggle, but also in victory. This is just the beginning, he said, and we knew that our journey was not over. But we were ready. Another week passed, and society continued to talk about us. We became a symbol of the struggle, but with support came disappointment. It turned out that even when you have the truth on your side, the system can try to squeeze you out by dragging the case into endless bureaucratic procedures and obstacles. But we weren't going to give up. If we were in this game, We couldn't just walk away. Trevor, tireless, woke up early, often before dawn. He met with lawyers, prepared the next steps, and followed the news. I, on the other hand, sat at home trying to recover, although I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still unfinished. All those days after the incident, I felt like my body was changing as it came to terms with the new reality, but my soul remained in turmoil. When Trevor and I asked the authorities for a fair investigation, we were given only a standard response. Officer Daniels, as we already knew, had been temporarily suspended from duty. He was being paid with our tax dollars, but there was no real response. Not from the city council, not from the police leadership. Everyone assured us that the case was under investigation, but all we saw were words. There was no action. And at that moment, we realized that if we wanted real justice, we had to take action ourselves. We turned to the public again. Trevor started organizing rallies, and I took on the role of speaking at them. I told my story and urged others not to remain silent. I appealed to Black mothers who fear for their children, to women who are humiliated, and to people who want change. They listened and supported us. Every day, more and more people joined us. Many shared their stories, and we began to realize that together we could change this. One day, we learned that Officer Daniels had not even been held accountable for his actions. That same day, we received news that he had been placed on administrative leave and would continue to receive his salary. That was the last straw. We decided we couldn't sit by any longer, or we would be left alone with our painful truth once again. That day, we reached out to Marcus and our team. It was our immediate reaction. We created a petition, which we submitted to the local council, and began working on a civil lawsuit. We weren't going to wait for the case to resolve itself. No, we decided we were going to see this through to the end, and we knew that justice would be served. The very next day, we were invited to another press conference, this time accompanied by community leaders and human rights activists. All this time, the video and our speeches remained in the spotlight. People rallied around us not only to show their support, but also to bring about real change in society. Trevor was there again, ready to support me in every word. My determination had reached its peak. This was no longer just our cause. We had become leaders of a movement. The cameras were on us again. I stood in front of the microphone and felt my heart pounding in my chest. I am speaking again, not for myself, but for all of us. We will not stand by. We will not wait for the system to start working on its own. The time has come. Our lives matter, and we will no longer be silent. My words rang out like a call for change. I was ready to fight to the end, even if the system continued to operate slowly and inefficiently. Trevor took the microphone after me and said, "What happened to Leah could have happened to any of us. But we are together, and we will not back down. Not today. Not tomorrow. We promise everyone who has experienced the same tragedy that their pain will be heard." Those words became a rallying cry for thousands of other people. Everyone was waiting for us. Everyone was ready to fight, and we realized we were creating something meaningful. A few days later, Marcus gave us the news. Senior police officials were starting to respond. They demanded a disciplinary investigation into Daniels, and this time things moved faster. However, we knew that only through public pressure could we get results. I was sitting in my room when I got a call from Trevor. "He's out. But this is just the beginning, Leah. We got the man we wanted, but we still need to bring about real change in the police force." The satisfaction from this news was only temporary. I knew that this process would take a long time, but there was no doubt that change was now inevitable. We had taken the first step, and now everything was moving towards establishing control over this situation so that it would never happen again. Justice had been served, but this was only the beginning. Trevor and I started receiving feedback from other people who had experienced similar incidents, and we started working on something bigger. This wasn't just our fight. It was a movement to change the entire system. It won't be easy, and I know we will face more challenges, but we are no longer alone. Our quest for justice has become part of a larger change, and we will stand until the end. The day of the trial arrived, and I felt my heart beating faster than ever before. It was the culmination of what we had started, and despite all my fears and anxieties, I knew that this fight was not just for me, but for all those who cannot stand in court and demand justice. Today, more than just words were needed. We had to prove that change is possible. Trevor and I sat in the courtroom, and I couldn't take my eyes off the defendant's table. Officer Daniel stood there, not looking at us, his gaze cold and contemptuous. He didn't seem to realize that his actions had led to this moment, that today he would not just be standing there, but would be held accountable for his actions. And here it was, our chance to finally feel some justice. Everyone was in the courtroom, us and dozens of people who had come to support us, people who had themselves experienced police aggression. They stood next to us, and we all felt the unity that filled the atmosphere. This was not just our case, it was the case of all those who were heard this time, who were given a chance to be heard. The process was long and difficult. With each question from the prosecutor, I felt how every moment of this trial was affecting me. A lot depended on my words, so I tried to stay strong. I couldn't let my son go through what I had gone through. My child should not have to grow up in a world where his mother, or anyone else, does not have the right to safety, peace, and tranquility. I sat in the courtroom and realized that this was no longer just about us. It was about the changes Trevor and I wanted to bring to society. We dreamed that every woman, every person, everyone who was oppressed by the system would be able to get support and protection. The process was slow, but it couldn't have been any other way. We all waited for the judge to deliver his verdict. I thought it would be difficult, and it was. But at that moment, everything we had been striving for began to become a reality. One thought ran through my head. We would no longer be in the shadows. This wasn't just my fight, it was a fight for all of us. And then, finally, the verdict. The judge paused for a moment before uttering the important words. Verdict: Officer Daniels is found guilty of abuse of authority, assault, and human rights violations. Based on the results of the investigation, he will be dismissed from his position and prosecuted for all of his actions. My heart began to beat faster. All those months of pain, struggle, and uncertainty had finally paid off. It was a victory, but not just for us. It was a victory for everyone who had been waiting for change. It was what we had been working toward from the very beginning. Trevor hugged me tightly, and I felt all those months of tension melt away. But the importance of the moment did not fade. We had done it. And it wasn't just our personal victory. It was a victory for everyone who had gone through something similar and who might not have had the courage to speak their truth. As we left the courtroom, Trevor and I felt an unusual sense of relief, even though we knew the fight wasn't over. We had to keep working to create a system that would truly work for everyone who needed protection. We began working with local advocacy organizations to raise awareness about systemic issues within the police. And we saw more and more people who had experienced injustice coming to us for help. This fight wasn't just for us, it was for everyone who needed justice. We launched campaigns for police reform, for better training and oversight. A few months later, we launched a fund to help victims of police violence and worked to pass laws that would promote greater transparency and accountability. All of this was made possible by those who supported us, by a community that couldn't leave us alone. But most importantly, we did this for our child, for little Justin. We promised him that the world he would be born into would be different, and that world has begun to change. We fought and will continue to fight for every child, every woman, every man who did not have a voice. When Justin took his first steps, Trevor and I stood next to him, holding each other's hands. And I knew that this moment was the result not only of our efforts, but of the efforts of thousands of people who stood behind us, who helped us achieve justice. Justice is not just a word, it is an action. And now I knew that we had not only won in court, but that we had built a foundation for the changes that would come after us. This story, this fight, this victory, it will not end. We have only just begun.